Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the Bible study. And this is a particularly special version of the Bible study because for the first time, we have the founding pastor of Bayside Church. Ray Johnson's here. Welcome, Ray.
Hey, I finally bought a Bible. You guys invite me to this thing. Thank you.
And we're going to get some use out of that. And of course, always the frontal lobe of Thrive College. We got Dina Davidson here. And we are going on a little...
Quick one.
Yeah.
Before we get into this, some of you may not know Dina that well. You went to where for college? And so give them your academic pedigree because a lot of people don't know this and it's very impressive.
Sure. So I was a homeschooled pastor's kid that majored in philosophy at a secular university. I had a very real crisis of faith. And after that, I had a list of questions that I didn't have the answer to. So from there, I went on my background in philosophy. I went and I studied apologetics at Biola. And I didn't go on it because I wanted to one day be on the Bible podcast, the Bible study pod.
What?
I know, right? I did it because I had a list of questions that were so challenging to my faith. And I really believed that Jesus was God. And I wanted to have great answers to those tough questions. So I earned my master's in Christian apologetics from Biola. And here we are today.
And like I said,
great school, great program. And Dean is everybody's kind of favorite, really smart person.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
In this place. Mark Clark's in the running for the same title, but
there's a few of them around here, but Dina's definitely at the top of my list. Like I said, the frontal lobe of Bayside and Thrive College. All right, we're going to do, I'm going to ask you to follow us on a little bit of a detour here. We've been in Ephesians. Those of you that have been watching and listening, you know we're in Ephesians, but we're kind of doing a 2-week deep dive on one particular family of churches in the New Testament that set the tone for all other churches. In fact, Thessalonians, Philippians, a good portion of the book of Acts, and this passage in 2 Corinthians we're about to read here is about these churches and why we should be more like these churches, especially the first one in Philippi and Thessalonica. And so it's just kind of a little mini series within the series where we're asking ourselves, how could we become the full expression of the New Testament church? And so the little background context here is that Paul is going on a second missionary journey. He wants to go visit all the churches that he started in the first one, but God says, no, don't do that. He gives him a dream. It's a big Greek guy, the Macedonian man. And he says, we come over here. We need the gospel over here. Paul changes his plan, goes into the incredible risk that is crossing over the Mediterranean into the Greek side. And he meets immediately his head board member, Lydia. Then he meets his head usher, the jailer. And then he meets his youth pastor, the demon-possessed teenager. And God miraculously bursts this church in Philippi.
So he basically had a bunch of losers and they started a church.
And they became the
just like Bayside.
Exactly. So, all right, enough context, Dina. Let's jump into this study. We're reading here in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. We're going to read the first 10 verses. Dina, go ahead and if you're driving, pull over or don't pull out your Bible. Other than that, pull out your Bible, 2 Corinthians chapter 8.
It's great stuff.
Love it. Chapter 8. And now, brothers, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. Out of the most severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the saints. And they did not do as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us in keeping with God's will. So we urged Titus, since he had earlier made a beginning, to bring also to completion this act of grace on your part. But just as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in your love for us, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. I am not commanding you, but I want to test the sincerity of your love by comparing it with the earnestness of others. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. And here is my advice about what is best for you in this matter. Last year, you were the first not only to give, but also to have the desire to do so. Now finish the work so that your eager willingness to do it may be matched by your completion of it according to your means.
Okay, Ray, I've heard you teach on 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians a ton. And my favorite part of your teaching is when you set the tone. Paul's writing here in Macedonia back to the church in Corinth, and you kind of set the tone. What challenge did Paul have here in trying to pastor this church in Corinth?
Okay, well, first you got to go, who's he writing this to?
Right.
And he's writing this to the Corinthians, obviously. Okay, and if you're going, what was Corinth like? Like, we have these people like whining, going, how in the world can you be a Christian when we have the internet? How in the world can you be a faithful, God-honoring person with good character? But we always, people going, I don't think I can be a Christian in California. I got to run away. You know, it's
Yes.
not that that's ever happened.
It's the hardest time ever in temptation.
Yeah. And you're going, wait a second, this is crazy. Because I've been to Corinth several times. We've taken tours to Corinth. I've been in the city, gotten to teach the Bible right where it happened. We've all been there. And Corinth, here's the markers of it. Number one, it's seaside and it's coastal. Okay,
Right.
Just like where we live. Second is it's wealthy. Third is it was sexually saturated, which is probably the biggest thing. When you go into Corinth, ancient Corinth down there, they have the whole city's there. The Bema seat where the Apostle Paul was tried is right there. You can stand where the Apostle Paul was right there. But you look back and there's a huge mountain called Corinth. Okay. And those things, they called them acropolises, which is acro, which means high, city high. And in those days, they had no real defense. So if they're getting attacked, they would try to locate their city at the base of a mountain. So if somebody invaded, they would all run up at the top of this mountain and they would fight everybody off. Okay. And so this guide takes me over and he goes, you may not want to tell everybody else about this, which I did, but he goes, look at the top of this thing. He goes, see that outline there? And you could see it, like it's 1,000 more feet up. You could see the outline of some building that had been a really big building, and just the bottom sort of wall is still there. And he goes, do you know what that is? I said, no. And he goes, that's the temple of Aphrodite. And he said they had 1,000 prostitutes up there. And that was where they went to worship. And they would go up, frenzied worship, and they would have sex with prostitutes as part of their worship thing. And it was basically an ancient fertility rite, and you were under a ton of pressure to do that.
Right.
Because if the ground wasn't fertile, everybody would die. So there's pressure to be sexually active with people that you're not married to. Okay. And then at night, a lot of these prostitutes would just come down into the town and kind of ply their trade. Okay. And we're literally going, from what I know, we're not doing that in California yet. Okay. And I love this because Paul writes 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. It's the longest stuff Paul wrote in any books because they're in such a crazy thing. I title this thing First Californians. Okay? I mean, think about it. You're going, okay, is there a place? It's wealthy. It's the place to be.
Right.
It's coastal. It's sexually saturated. That's Corinth. This might be the most relevant thing to Californians. Okay. And what I love is he doesn't write them and say, move to Texas. It's the only way you're going to have them made. Okay. But he does.
There is no Greek word for Tennessee.
Exactly. He writes this book to strengthen these people. And he writes this book. And I think he pretty much I'm going to give you the core markers and steps to be a godly person. Okay. By the way, there's one other really cool thing. The first time I was there, this is probably 20 years ago, took a tour there. And the guide goes, I want to take you there because we're not supposed to be there. He goes, but I want to show you something. Okay. And so he goes, so come with me. So we kind of leave the group. We go across the street, down this other street, climb over this wall, and kind of go into this fenced off field we're not supposed to be in. And it's not excavated yet. And he said, it's interesting. He said, I've been told, he'd never been there. He said, I've been told that there is a marker here. And it was a street marker because they built a street all the way up, Marble Street, all the way up from the ocean into this town. And he said, in the book of Romans, okay, it says this, Erastus, who is the city's director of public works, and our brother Quartus send you greetings. And what he says, so this is when Paul is writing to the Romans. Okay? And he said, all these critics for 100 years said, oh, this is proof the Bible's made up. It's not, Erastus is not listed in anywhere. We can't find anything with his name on it and all of this kind of stuff. And he goes, I think there is a something over there and his name's on it. Do you want to go see if we can find it? So we hop this thing, we go over and we are brushing because the stones are still there. We're brushing all this stuff out of the way. And we find one, it's got letters on it, and we brush it off. And it says in their language, dedicated to Erastus, the director of public works. And we're standing, I took pictures of this thing. We're standing there going, a stone in Corinth confirms what Paul writes to the Romans.
That's cool.
And I think it was dedicated to this guy, okay?
Right.
Because he's the guy that made this whole thing happen.
Wow.
Right.
And so this is a great book with a ton of really phenomenal stuff in it.
What I love
so
about
good.
this and everything you just said is the contrast between the Corinthian church you just described and the Macedonian churches that Paul describes. It just couldn't be more stark and more instructive to us. Dina, you're sitting down, you're having your cup of coffee in the morning, you're studying this passage, you're looking at that Paul writing to this Corinthian church that's not following through and talking about this faithful things. How do you deal with this passage? What do you see there?
Yeah. The first thing that caught me was the mention that it was the Macedonian churches, because we just came through forever in the book of Acts, a wonderful forever, but it was forever. And I remember, it's hard, it's persecution, but something happens when he gets to the Macedonian churches, and it just the persecution gets so much tougher. And I think that really ties in where it says in verse 2, out of the most severe trial. And I think it just backs up everything that was talked about in the book of Acts, that this was a church that was having an extremely challenging circumstance. It could just be the persecution in that area. Maybe there's more to that specific trial. But what he says next is striking to me, because this is not how I respond personally to extreme trial. Overflowing joy. And then you pair that with extreme poverty. So you've got these believers who are in an intense trial, and they have extreme poverty, which this is a recipe for depression, right? This is a recipe for where is God in this? And their response was overflowing joy. Honestly, this is a type of faith that the Bible is speaking to that I often do not possess.
All right. So I grew up kind of lower middle class. Our month and our money did not match up frequently as a child. There was 9 of us. That's a phrase I stole from you. And Kelly, my wife, she grew up in real serious poverty, like lots and lots of drugs, needles in her front yard, moved 18 times in 20 years, HUD housing. And you know what? That extreme poverty she grew up in and my mild poverty produced 2 different things. She is a much more generous person than me.
Wow.
And it's a weird kind of contrast. I think you could be really, really wealthy and very generous. I've met a lot of those people. And you could be very, very poor and very greedy. And you could be very, very poor and, like my wife, very generous. And you could be very, very wealthy. And, it works all the different ways. But there is something about that dynamic where she had to believe that God was a provider in a much more intense way than I did. And she does believe it. And she just believes it. I think that same effect is happening here. Whereas I grew up just poor enough that I want to hold on to my stuff. I don't want to go back there and have any of that. And so trusting and letting go is difficult for me. Here's the city of Corinth. They were orators, right? They were celebrity speakers. And Paul goes, I'm not taking an honorarium from you because you guys all make a ton of money doing this, your celebrity speaking. Athens, the head of philosophy, Corinth, the head of oration. And so Paul makes tents down there, right? But in their wealth, they made a promise to give to the poor in Jerusalem, and they didn't follow through.
It's crazy.
And then, just as you said, Dina, in their extreme poverty here. Now, what's happening? The Macedonian region is conquered by Rome they've been Roman for 150 years. And the taxation on them was extreme. Then on top of that,
California.
Yes, exactly. It's the exact analogy. Then on top of that, Christianity had 2 qualities that made the Romans hate them. So the Romans were very tolerant of a lot of different religions. As long as you worship Caesar and you weren't novel and disruptive. These 2 things describe Christianity. They didn't worship Caesar, and they were very novel, and they were very disruptive. And so they have the taxation on them, and then they have the persecution on them.
Yeah.
And yet they remain generous. And here you have the Corinthians, wealthy port city, and they don't remain generous. Yeah. And it's just, I don't know, it's convicting to me. Every time I read this, I'm like, this is like Kelly and me.
I think there's something about what you're describing where it's basically like control, right?
Yes.
So it seems like the Macedonians, the world was so out of control for them that they had learned no attempt to control this trial is going to work. No attempt to provide for myself is ultimately going to fix this problem. Their lives were so out of control, they didn't believe that they were sufficient to fix the problem. It's almost like they had to trust in God, and that was the choice they made. Whereas other people, it's just maybe we deceive ourselves into thinking the world is just inside our control. Like if we strategize a little bit more, we talk to the right financial advisor, we schemed a little bit, we moved to the right place, then we would have the life that we want. And I just think that's an interesting thing that if you can yield yourself, and this is maybe getting into application, but like if you can yield yourself to the chaos in your life and say, I need someone bigger than me to fix this problem, that's where the life that you want, the joy and the peace can actually be found.
Okay, here's a question I want to ask you, Pastor Ray. But
can I insert this?
Go ahead, absolutely.
This verse might be one of the most powerful in all of both Corinthian epistles. He says, out of their most severe trial, so they're going through really hard times. Okay, they're and what I'd say is this: like when I wrote this down, I said, markers of great God honoring people. Number one marker here is this: they didn't let their circumstances affect their level of joy or their level of generosity. That's like miraculous. I mean, but it is, right now we're going, what do spiritual people look like? Oh, they have the whole book of Hebrews memorized, all of this kind of stuff. And we've all these whack out online people going, oh, you're spiritual if you do X, Y, and Z. No. Their first mark of a really God honoring impact type person is they did not let their level of joy, their circumstances affect their level of joy or their level of generosity. In other words, their inner life and their generosity life wasn't anchored on circumstances. Yeah. It was anchored on a deep belief that God was there and had better days ahead. I think that's needed in Corinth and it's needed in California.
Absolutely. And it's needed in Christianity. I can't tell you the amount. It's always weird to criticize podcasts on a podcast.
Sure. Totally.
But the amount of podcasts
where it's like, stop scrolling.
You're not spiritual because you don't see this issue the way I see this issue, as opposed to the amount of podcasts that say, let's be radically Jesus generous because he died for us and he was the ultimate example. It's just, it's a rampage out there. Okay, here's a question I want to ask you. It's related
to
that
question, can I throw something else
You absolutely can.
Because I think it's a big deal. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. Everybody's throwing the word courage around right now. Okay, like pastors look it up and say, if you don't do exactly what I say and vote for who I'm telling you to vote for, then you don't have courage.
Right.
Okay? Or if you don't get my pet project, you don't have courage. Or if you don't mention so and so or whatever.
Or if you did say it, that shows you don't have courage because you're going with the wave.
In a sense, you can't win. And so in a sense, you're going, what are the markers that somebody has courage? It's not that they're hiding behind their keyboard attacking pastors or Christians or whoever. That is not courage. That's cowardice. Okay. I look at this and I go, what's courage? Courage is going through hell on earth and not walking away from God. Courage is going through hell on earth and not letting that destroy my level of joy. Courage is going through hell on earth and keep giving. Right. It's like every single thing you want is on the other side of not giving up.
Yes.
So you look at this and go, that's what courage is. And I saw it last week. It was pretty cool. We had the 50th, 50 years ago when I was way younger. My wife's in high school. I'm just graduating high school, and we start a Bible study that grew up into a church. So last weekend we had our 50th anniversary. And all these people came back. A lot of them were older than us. And it was, and then they said, would you preach for 30 minutes, which nobody wanted because they wanted to meet each other. So I just got up and said, I just want to say thank you to some people that are here. And this guy named Frank, he's awesome. He led worship. He now has advanced Parkinson's. And so instead of hiding, he went on stage, sat in a chair with some of the old members of the band, and they played the instruments. And Frank shook and sang into the microphone as best he could. I got tears in my eyes. I'm going, and I just said, Frank, I want to thank you publicly. You showing up here and doing that had courage.
Wow.
Yeah.
We had a lot of women there who'd lost husbands, and it would have been easy for them to hide out, and they showed up. That took courage. And John Archer, the guy that led me to Christ and talked me back into a relationship with God when I threw it away, is the reason I have everything I have in my wife, our church, all this kind of stuff. His wife died a month and a half ago. I was with her and him the night before she passed away, and he showed up. And I just went, courage is not somebody with a keyboard whining and complaining about, no, people don't have courage. No, courage is showing up. And they just kept showing up for God. And this is a great, great book. Matter of fact, it's almost like this needs to get back into Christians instead of the garbage that's in a lot of people.
Yes.
It's good.
I've been saying to our congregation and Auburn just a ton. I've said it every week for probably the last 3 months, even before all the incredible tragedy of the current moment. I say, outrage is easy. Outrage is so easy. And there are things that make me outraged. I'm not immune to it. I get very upset at how things are handled and said and things that are done and tragedies. Reconciliation's hard. Staying loyal isn't loyal until it's hard to be loyal. And so this Macedonian, and here's what's amazing about this church is they're not Greek God-fearers that know the Old Testament. When Paul comes, he spends like 3 months with them. And Timothy teaches there, and Luke teaches there, and I think Silas teaches there, and a few others. So they get this good teaching, but it's not a long duration. And they have this epiphany. And the epiphany is because Christ sacrificed, we have to sacrifice. Because Christ gave everything to us, we should be willing to give everything whenever it's needed. And I see people that go to church every Sunday for most of their life, or they listen to a ton of different preachers online, and they don't get that epiphany. And the Corinthians struggled staying in that epiphany. But yet somehow, by mastering the real dynamic of Jesus, I did not deserve him to die for me. He's given me eternity. I didn't earn it. Now my life is spent giving. Now you think about this. Macedonians, Greeks, under Roman rule, sending their money that they don't have any of it to Jews in Jerusalem. This is, like I always say, we like the miracles in the New Testament where the blind gets healed and the lame man walks in front of this thing. This is a miracle.
Yes.
This is an incredible miracle. Okay, now I want to ask you this question, but you got anything you want to say before I ask it?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Always, but we'll never get to the question.
Okay, exactly. So here's the question I want to ask. There's someone out there, they're listening to this and they're going, 3 pastors sitting around talking about money passage again. That's all you pastors want to talk about is money. When people ask you that question, Pastor Ray, what's your answer? How do you handle that?
Number one, I'm assuming you tune into this because you're a Bible person, which is awesome, because so are we. We're a Bible-believing, Bible-teaching church. Matter of fact, we have our Bible conference this year. I should talk about that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Bible conference, I gathered our pastors a few years ago, and I don't usually do this. I said, I think we should launch a Bible conference. And they all looked at me like we're nuts. Now, I looked them up online, and there were none. And I thought maybe there are none because nobody goes to one. But I went, we need to launch a Bible conference. But I mean, like a serious Bible conference. Teach it, have seminars, all this kind of stuff. Do it for 3 days. And the reason was I think we have a whole lot of people that, number one, are ignoring the Bible, or they're changing it to make it politically correct on the right or the left or whatever. And I just think we need to give people the straight word of God. Well, we'd launched this Bible conference. It's the first night, and I'm driving out. You guys were there, probably the same thing. We're all driving there. My wife goes, what do you think's going to happen? I went, maybe there's none of these because nobody comes. And so if there's like 12 people, we'll take them out to dinner
Right.
and let the speaker talk at the table. And we arrive, and our parking lots were full, overflow was full. That time we had to put it in some other room. We had to broadcast it in other rooms. This year, it's gone beyond that. It's in 5 places. So number one, I'm thrilled about that. Okay. The problem is this: lots of people go to the Bible conference to learn to be more judgmental. And so we teach this stuff straight. So when somebody comes up and says money, number one is somebody will come up and go, I don't believe in tithing. The 10% stuff, I don't believe, da, da, da. And you can debate that till the cow comes home. So now what I've done is I've said, hey, first of all, if you're currently giving more than 10% of your income, fine with me, believe what you want about this, okay? But if you're not, this is just an excuse for why you're not going to give generously. In the wealthy, these people are poverty stricken and they're given, and in the wealthiest culture in history, they're not.
Right.
So that's number one. Second is Jesus talked more about money than heaven and hell combined.
Right.
Third is a lot of books in the New Testament talk about Philippians is a thank you letter to a church because it's generous.
Yes.
So, and here he's literally going, look, we want you to give. I've sent Titus to get more money from you. I mean, like, read this stuff.
Right.
And the reason that's, you hit a hot button with me is this. There's a church in Southern California, Mariners Church. Love the church, great pastor, all this kind of stuff. And so the other day I was thinking about their pastor, and who I like and have a lot of respect for. And I went, I wonder how they're doing. So I looked it up on my map anyway, and then I clicked the thing about Mariners, and then it has all these reviews of churches. Okay. And I realized
the Yelp reviews.
It's all 1 to 5. And so it was like the usual 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 1. 5, 5, 5. Like, I met Christ there. My whole family met Christ there. I got off drugs there. I met my wife. 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 1. 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 1. There's no 3s. Okay.
Right.
And all the 5s were God's working about, like, this amazing. Our church is changing the world. All this kind of stuff. 1s were pastor talking about money.
Mm-hmm.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Pastor talking about money. 5, 5, 5. Pastor talking about money. All you have to do is read it, and you find out some people, they do not want us to actually teach the whole Bible. They want us to ignore everything that causes them to sacrifice and be generous. And you look at this and you're going, wait a second. I actually think this passage says they first gave themselves to the Lord. And then they gave.
Yes.
And that's
the right order.
It's the exact right order. And I think all those ones are people that haven't given themselves to the Lord yet, so they're not about to read the stuff that they find hard.
That's really good.
So you can tell you set up something. I read that.
While you were saying that, I thought of a line I'm going to use. I said, I'm going to tell my folks, I'm going to only mention money as much as the Bible does.
There you go.
And so if you don't want me to mention the money, I'll just guarantee it only as much. But the sad news for that is, man, it's in there. One of the things I said, Dina, a couple weeks ago during the offering, I said, we're going to talk about everything in this church. We're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about sins. We're going to talk about failure. We're going to talk about marriages. We're going to talk about kids. And you can't talk about all that stuff without talking about money.
Yep.
You can't. You can't just put one of those aside. All right. We're going to go a little over.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. I'm just going to keep interrupting.
Yeah.
I became a Christian. I was an atheist.
Right.
Became a Christian. And this guy named Kent Tucker, world-class guy, he just starts mentoring me and discipling me. And he was older, about 5 years older than I was. And we start meeting for breakfast, and we're going through the Bible. And he said, a business guy had just left, and I took his place at the restaurant. And he said, that was an interesting conversation with this guy. He goes, because I'm mentoring him, I'm a little further ahead with him. And I said, what happened? He goes, well, we're talking about, each week there's a subject out of the Bible, and I'm going to drive the Bible into people's lives. And he goes, this was the week I had to talk to this guy about generosity and tithing and sacrificial giving. And he said, the guy stopped me and he said, well, hold on for a second. I'm okay with everything else. The prayer stuff, the, holiness stuff. I'm okay with all that kind of stuff. He goes, there is no way I am going to give 10% of my money away because you're a pastor. You don't make much money. He said, for me, I just make too much money. He goes, I'm a business guy and I'm very successful, and I can't, direct quote, he said, I can't imagine giving that much money away.
Mm.
And my buddy Kent looks at him and says, that's okay. God has a solution for that. And he goes, oh, good. What is it? And Kent said, I'll just pray that God reduces your income to the point where 10% doesn't look like much. Then you can finally be obedient to God.
Amazing.
I like
And
this guy.
and so then Kent, now I'm a college sophomore. I
Right.
have no money.
Right,
I had
right.
to put myself through college and graduate school. And I am a poverty-stricken college student. And so Kent goes, all right, now we're talking about you. We may as well talk about you. You're going to obey God and tithe 10% or more, or what? And he looked at me and goes, you're much safer from God's point of view, giving God his first 10%, not stealing what the Bible says is God's in the first place, and trusting God than you ever will be stealing God's 10% and expecting God to bless your finances in your life. And so, like, I've been a Christian, like, not that long. I'm a poverty stricken. I went home and I went, okay, how much money do I have? $1.17. My first tithe was 17 cents. I literally
Nice.
put it in the offering thing. But I started tithing then. That was like 50 years ago.
Right,
And we haven't stopped.
right,
And then you basically go, and then above that you give.
right.
So this stuff is, I'll bet everybody's tuned off this by now. But for anybody that's still here, I actually believe this. The minute you actually start doing what the Bible says in this area, your life becomes an adventure because God has to show up and answer his promises. I get more letters about this from people about than any other thing. I took that challenge, I started honoring
Right.
God with my stuff, and let me tell you what God did. It's pretty
Right.
cool.
So good.
Right.
Love it.
All right, Dina, we came to application
Okay.
time here. The order of hermeneutics is simply this. We understand the context. We actually interpret the passage correctly, and then we got to apply it. So what's your advice? How are you going to apply this passage?
Okay, well, I think a particularly 21st century problem is that we have a real lack of awareness of the actual state of our finances. So most people are just completely crossing tithing and giving off their list because they're like, you have no idea. Like, I'm so deep in debt, there's no possible way. So here's my practical challenge to grow awareness for you that you do have the capacity to give. Maybe not yet a 10%, although I recommend trusting God and just making that leap. Here's my to-do for you. Every time you add to cart, I want you to go, and if you actually click purchase, I want you to go and give, okay? So if you add to cart, spend $10 on Amazon, $10 to the church. Just match it. Just match your add to cart for one particular week and see what you are capable in 1 week of giving. That would be my recommendation.
Andrew always says, everyone's generous to themselves.
Yeah.
So we find, he's got another great one that he reminded me when you were talking. He says there's 3 levels of giving the Bible talks about: tithings, offerings, and ouch. These guys are in the ouch giving. All right, I'm going to say mine then, Ray. I'm going to give you the last word here. We like to say around here at Bayside, reach wide, teach deep, or grow deep, and unleash compassion. I think this church demonstrates that. Paul, to reach Macedonians, took great risk. Mm-hmm. So my application question to you would be, who do you think's too far for God to reach in your life? Mm-hmm. And maybe they're like the Macedonian man. Maybe they're not too far. Maybe God's just waiting. And maybe they'll become some of the greatest and most faithful Christians ever. You think they're too far for God, like all the way in Macedonia, but actually God's got great plans for them. The second one, don't underestimate the power of just mastering the message of Jesus. These Greek, pagan, polytheistic unbelievers all of a sudden encounter the message of Jesus, and it transforms them dramatically to where they're demonstrating their devotion more than the wealthy group of flaky Christians in Corinth and all sorts of other churches that had to step up on them. And so, sometimes we're studying the Bible week in and week out. We're turning a podcast like this. We're opening our Bible in the morning. We're going to church, and we think, does it really make a difference? It absolutely does. That truth really does transform us. And then the last one is they unleash compassion. I said this at church last week. I said, the more you accumulate, the more you worry. Because when you accumulate, you have to maintain that. You have to store it. You have to protect it. And when you start giving it away, it's just the greatest, most freeing experience. I no longer have to maintain or store it. I get to make someone happy with it. I lose a lot of sunglasses I used to get really grumpy about this because you think, yeah, it's a nice pair of sunglasses. Someone finds it. They should ask around. But people don't do that. They just put them on and wear them. And they're like, I found some sunglasses. And then I decided to change my mind on that. And I decided instead of thinking I lost sunglasses and people didn't return them to me, I started thinking, I'm the giver of sunglasses. Everywhere I go, I'm shedding I'm like the Johnny Appleseed of sunglasses. And honestly, I probably lost 2 pairs this year and just thought, well, praise God, I just blessed someone. That mental shift, as goofy as that illustration sounds, it just makes life better.
Mm-hmm.
It makes life fun. It makes life more Christ-like. So yeah, find something to give away.
That's good.
All right, Pastor Ray. Now we've given our answers. How do we really apply this? How would you apply this passage?
I think it's pretty obvious in here. If any of you are writing notes, I hope you're not doing that and driving. I would just say this: the whole issue is know who you belong to.
Mm.
Know who you belong to. Know who your future
good.
belongs to. Know who your life belongs to. And he does that in verse 5, because he says, but they gave themselves first, so they knew who they belonged to. And the only reason you know who you belong to is not who you say you belong to; it's who you give yourself to.
That's
A lot of people going, I'm a Christian. No, you're not. You haven't given yourself to God. Okay? You haven't given your stuff to God. You haven't given your future to God. You haven't given your sexuality to God. He goes, they first gave themselves to the Lord. And now a lot of people stop that. They're going, okay, I'm going to give myself to the Lord. It's not biblical to stop there. Okay? And then it says this, then they gave themselves to us in keeping with God's will. And I think, and this is politically incorrect these days, but I think the God-honoring, whole biblical Christian life is you give yourself to God, but you also give yourself to a body of believers, a
Yes.
church family.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's impossible to be a biblical Christian without doing both.
I agree.
There's no Lone Ranger stuff. That church shopping and stopping, just stop that stuff. And that's what happened to me. The reason my life changed and kind of how it turned out was this church was phenomenal at challenging you to give yourself to God, not just become a Christian. I think I had received Christ, but it was about 3 or 4 months later at a camp where I went, oh man, I didn't know I was supposed to give myself to God. Went on a walk up on this mountain at Canyon Dam, and I literally went, okay, God, you got me. I'm all in.
good.
Totally changed the course of my life. But fortunately, this church also were like, you cannot fulfill the New Testament without giving yourself to God's people and the church.
So good.
That's the family. Okay. And that combination of giving yourself to God, but also fully giving yourself to a body of believers is like for me, it's like taking 2 live wires, hooking them together. And by the way, it's straight here. It's in the middle of what he talks about money. He veers off and he goes, well, the deeper issue is this: give yourself to God, then give yourself to us.
So good.
Then, because I've given myself to God, my stuff isn't mine anymore. So the question isn't what am I going to give? It's what do I keep?
That's awesome.
So it's funny I love Bible studies, but at some point you're going, oh man.
Right.
Most people rather talk about this than do it.
Right.
So
Right. You know, you're really studying the Bible when you start getting convicted. You forget it's a podcast and you're just going, oh,
I know. Same here.
Hey, next week we are going to have Jason Kane on the show. You definitely want to tune in. By the way, when we were talking about all the Bible study and we were all the campus leaders were going, I don't know, Ray, we don't have enough time. Jason Kane was the biggest skeptic. He was the biggest one, and we'll ask him about it next week.
Yeah. Make sure you tell him what Jason Kane said to me after the Bible study.
We'll get the whole story.
Oh, that's good.
He became the biggest convert, and you'll get.
You mean about the Bible conference?
The Bible conference.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a great story. We'll ask
I love
Jason.
it.
He'll tell it firsthand. You'll laugh. You'll love it, and you'll fall more in love with Jason because he's awesome. All right, we're going to be in 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Then we'll go back to Ephesians. So one more week. That's Jason's week. And in Ephesians, we're going to go on a special emphasis in chapter 5 and 6 on relationships. Everything the Holy Spirit inspires Paul to write on relationships. And it's going to be every type of relationship. So if you want to strengthen your relationships, definitely get in for that 2 Corinthians 9 next week. And then we're going to do an emphasis on relationships. By the way, you guys have been doing a great job. I've been getting more and more comments. Everyone's been super encouraging. Our views are going up. So you are sharing. Keep doing that, my friend, because we're all going to get a lot more Jesus-y when we study the Bible. So anyway, thanks for watching this week, and we'll see you next week.